The last people in, starting the recording. Over to you, Mike. Thanks for joining us from Ottawa.
Wonderful. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So I'm Mike Gifford. I'm a open standards and practices lead at CivicActions. Do a lot of work on accessibility. I'm also a Drupal core accessibility maintainer, but have been involved in enough multi CMS events that definitely appreciate seeing people from Typo 3 and from Umbraco and others to go off and to flesh out this conversation. So my talk is using the Web Almanac to understand trends, and so I'm covering some elements. Like you can definitely read a lot of the material from the Web Almanac, but because we've got like such a short time to go off and to do this, all I'm trying to do here is to bring out what the potential is for the Almanac and how we can use this as a community to help understand and better help each of our projects be able to go off and to be better in 26 than we were in 24 and again previously in other years. So I want to go off and begin initially with an overview of what the Web Almanac is, because a lot of people may not know. The HTTP archive is a project of the Internet Archive. So if people are familiar with archive.org, it's related to that initiative to try and to store and to snapshot information about the web. And the HTTP archive crawls millions of websites a month. I think it's about 17 million. That's at least the number that we used for the Web Almanac is 17 million websites were crawled for this. And the URLs come from the Chrome User Experience Report. So a lot of this is tied to Google and Google's infrastructure. But there's an effort to try and pull out all kinds of different information that we can from these monthly scans. And one of the important pieces is what is the technology that is being used underneath the web. And we're using Wapalizer as the detection engine for this. Now, some of you might know that Wapalizer was an open source tool up until recently. It's now a proprietary tool, but there was an open source fork that the Web Almanac has used, which allows them to keep working on and extending that. So, and that basically looks for various different elements when it's looking at a web page to try and determine what technology is there underneath the hood. It also uses Google Lighthouse to scan the content for performance, for accessibility, SEO, and best practices. Now, Google Lighthouse has for accessibility, it uses DQ's Axe, which is one of the better is one of the best open source accessibility engines, but it's built to avoid false positives. So it's also a really good one for this, because it will both look for or find accessibility errors in things like web components, but it will also avoid a lot of the accessibility issues that aren't really issues. And recently they've started scanning both the home page of the website as well as a secondary page. So there's 2 scans per domain that are available in the 17 million web pages that are being scanned. So it's a really interesting way to go off and to get a snapshot of the web. Now the HTTP archive has monthly reports that are available that allow you to look at and to evaluate a number of different trends, and so you can see a dashboard, and you can evaluate the dashboard as part of the HTTP archives monthly scans. But the Almanac is an effort to try and pull this data together and dig in more deeply. And so the Web Almanac is an annual snapshot of the web, and it's pulling together highlights along various different subject areas, and all this information is organized by volunteers, and it's really set up as a snapshot in time. So to get a sense of what are the things that are are relevant at this particular moment. So you can go back and look at previous years' almanacs and get a sense of what were the issues and concerns in 2019 and what are they now. So I worked on the accessibility chapter and the sustainability chapter. I'm listed as an author in both, an analyst in the accessibility one as well. And accessibility is and it actually was, I didn't intend to go off and write the accessibility chapter, but again, volunteers, sometimes people get overwhelmed with other stuff and aren't able to go and to deliver on their hopes. Anyways, I filled in and wrote the accessibility chapter for this year, but I definitely was not intending it. But accessibility is being included in this from the beginning. Sustainability was added in 2022. And again, because of volunteers, 2023 was skipped. So if you look at the progression, not all years are included in this. And so it's only when we can gather enough volunteers and enough of the community together that we can go and have an almanac. So there's, because I was also involved in the analytics, I was able to go off and to look at both the editorial side in terms of how the content is written, but also what are the analytics available and what can you do with that? And I found that something that we could do a lot more with than we presently are. So all of the data right now is available in a public Google BigQuery database. So if you've got a Google BigQuery account and you want to investigate this information, you can both get access to the queries that were run, because all of those are built into the report. So you can get both the spreadsheets and the queries that were used to go off and to generate them. But if you have a Google BigQuery account, you can access the 72 terabyte data Google BigQuery file and can fine tune that to find out what are the specific implementations of typo 3 that we might want to learn from, or for example, like I wanted to go off and look at accessibility and get a sense of how accessible governments are around the world, because that's an issue that many governments are looking at, particularly in the European Union with the European Accessibility Act and the Web Accessibility Directive. There's a lot of attention right now on that in Europe, but also in the States. The Department of Justice is now trying to put additional pressure on the states to go off and to be accessible and to meet WCAG 2.1 specifications. So I was able to create a leaderboard around accessibility, both with the European Union and countries in the European Union and states in the US. And as far as I'm aware, there's been no one else has had access to the data to be able to do a global scan of government websites around accessibility. So this was a real first for accessibility to be able to put this on the chart. And I think Luxembourg was the most accessible country, followed by the Netherlands, and Colorado was the most accessible state. I've got other bits of data behind this because I wanted to be able to actually pull out the data, not just use the averages, because people would I was worried about people questioning the data, and I wanted to be able to have have information behind there so they could go off and can validate that if they wanted to. But this can be extended, and there may be other things that you might be interested in finding out, whether it's CMS use in a vertical. Maybe you're interested in looking at the education sector. Maybe there's other pieces that you might be able to pull together to address another vertical that's important to you. These queries are designed to be extended, and there may be other opportunities to go off and to pull out useful information that's beneficial for you and your project. The summary of the accessibility and the sustainability chapters comes down to the web is definitely still filled with barriers and bloat. So there's a lot of work to do to make the web better, in order to remove those accessibility barriers and make sure that we have a more performant and less environmentally impactful digital experience. So one of the things that is an interesting challenge is that the WAPalizer isn't necessarily going to track everything, partly because not all CMS have been have the tells written into them that are easy for Wappleizer to go off and evaluate. So if you've got a new CMS, it may be something that is not being addressed by the system. So it's or a new framework, or if you're using a headless implementation. For example, there's a lot of Drupal websites that are you have an API endpoint, and then you have some headless implementation beyond that. So there might be very few indicators that Drupal's involved behind the scenes, and I think that's the case of a number of other CMS as well, where there's multiple tools involved and not all of them are exposed, or at least exposed as easily. So yeah, there's an opportunity to improve those Wappleizer tells if you want your CMS to be identified in this study in the future. One of the neat things that came out by looking at accessibility and comparing these different tools is it's really easy to see that the choice of tool does make a difference. That there is a considerable difference between the CMSs that are the better performing CMS, the CMSs that have invested in accessibility and set up good defaults, and also one of the most accessible CMSs is Adobe AEM, and partly that's around the size and the scale of the sites that are behind this, and those organizations that can afford to go off and to have accessibility professionals involved in the process. I think it's also useful to see that the Lighthouse results year after year, that we've seen improvements in that. So again, I think that the industry is looking at the Lighthouse results, whether that's individually or cumulatively, and trying to go off and to build towards a better standard as Google has defined. Now, if Google simply went and changed their algorithms so that getting 100 across the board in a Google Lighthouse score was sufficient to get on the top ranking of your Google search, then we see a lot more attention paid to this. But we're not. Google has not done that yet. They've not decided to go off and to prioritize their search algorithms in a way that would optimize us to go off and to build that type of an experience. I also noticed, different chapters have broken this out differently, but I wanted to go off and to pull out the page builders from the content management systems, because it's difficult to compare a tool like Wix or Squarespace, where you have a built-in subscriber base with an open source tool that anyone can bundle together and can manage. You have a lot more control in a page builder or a web platform like that severely limits the options for users to adjust and to modify the structure of the information that's presented. So it's I split it up into different sections. I also did that with JavaScript as well, because there's a lot of different front end implementations to go off and consider. So the Almanac is being built by volunteers, and some of the chapters of the Almanac are not yet published. So keep that in mind as well. I wanted to think ahead to some emerging trends, you can definitely look at the most popular CMSs, and WordPress is still by far the most popular CMS that is on the platform, but Drupal and Joomla are definitely included in that as well. There's a few others listed, but you can go to the spreadsheet and see the full list of the information, so that you're not going to be limited just by what's available in the report. If you wanted to dig into to see where your CMS lies and what the tools you're using, how they fit within that. So do look at the Google spreadsheets that are behind the data in the report. It's also worthwhile to note that Google is the most popular source of third-party scripts, and it's used not on all websites, but the vast majority are using one or multiple Google products in evaluating often for looking at just analytics. But there's other tools as well. Certainly YouTube is another one that's there. But it is worthwhile reminding people that there are alternatives to Google, and that those may both have better privacy controls as well as better performance results as well. So another thing that we noticed through the scans is that knowledge graphs, and particularly graph retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, graph RAG implementations, are becoming more prevalent. And these are important for both SEO and looking ahead to AI and future AI integration. We're also seeing greater adoption of JSON LD and same as, to again provide greater semantic information, so that machines can help us go off and piece together the complicated worlds that we live in. And again, we're seeing year after year page weights are increasing, which is useful which is fine for many people who have high bandwidth and fast machines, but that's not the majority of the world. So there's certainly a lot of people who are being cut out because of bloated web pages, and third-party JavaScript files certainly add to that. So a couple takeaways that I wanted to raise on this. There's lots of opportunities to try and to find better ways to build better tools. So what are the questions that when you're looking at the Web Almanac, what's missing? When you're reading through the chapters that you find relevant, what are the things that you the questions that you were not able to go off and to find within the work? And some of the chapters are quite long, and so it could be that there's but even that, we haven't necessarily provided all of the answers that people are looking to solve. So I think that there's limitations in terms of what can be done. And when we were trying to go off and build queries for accessibility, there's lots of things that we'd like to be able to do. Like in Europe, accessibility statements are really quite important. It'd be useful to go off and know the use of accessibility statements. But in order to be able to determine how many sites use accessibility statements, we both need to be able to have we need to have a way to identify where those accessibility statements are, and we have to do that in a multilingual context. And it takes some resources to go off and know where to look for accessibility statements in in how many different languages do you want to support in order to look for that, to be able to, even if you're just looking within the European Union, you're looking for over a dozen languages that you would want to be able to search for in the footer of the web page, just to see whether or not there's something called accessibility statement in that. And there isn't necessarily the consistency around how you would look for that. There's also calls for sustainability statements and privacy statements. So if there's a way to go off into so that was one of the challenges we had, and why we weren't able to go off and to include that. We were definitely also interested in looking at things like plain language. Can we evaluate the nature of the content that is in the database, and has are websites being written for a level that includes plain language that's understandable for people. And plain language is something that helps everyone, right? Because whether you're just a busy person, or whether you're somebody who's learning this as a second language, or somebody who has a cognitive disability, there's lots of ways that plain language can be really quite beneficial. But it's not something that is it was not an easy thing for us to go off and to be able to evaluate within the framework of a BigQuery search. There's also some of the queries need to be built in beforehand, so that the data can be stored and available in the database. So there might be some simple evaluations that could be done when you're when the pages are being crawled, which would then need to be in the database before you do the query in order to find that information out. So there are some things that are timing issues as well. How many people here are using web components or looking at web components? Or just just a show of hands of people who are interested in web components? A couple people, okay. There's currently no evaluations to go off and to determine whether or not web components are being used right now, because again, you need to do custom queries to go off and evaluate those, and there's no, all of the tags are customized. So how do you determine where and how web components are being used within this? But that's a real space where there's a hole in the market for the Almanac, and that we aren't tracking and evaluating web components. It was nice at CMS Connect in August, seeing the all of the interest around AI integration into CMSs, whether that's in chat-based interfaces or in personalization. But again, we don't have any way to track that in the Web Almanac either. And we should be starting to go off and look for how do we evaluate these, and there will probably come out to have some common tools that we can look for and analyze as part of the chapter. But it isn't something that we can easily go off and do at this point. It's not included in the report at the moment. I definitely feel that there's a lot of opportunities to go off and look at the legislation and to see how legislation is implemented in practice in different places. And the work that I did with the accessibility chapter was very much focused on what can we do for accessibility in governments. But the European Accessibility Act covers more than just governments. So how do we make sure that, is it possible to start tracking this? How well are different countries implementing the European Accessibility Act? And are we seeing that there's patterns within the countries that we might be able to evaluate, something beyond just the domain name? Because the domain name is not necessarily a sufficient indication as to whether or not this is something that is country specific or not. But yeah, being able to track legislation into practice around digital products, and also being able to provide some type of leaderboard for other things that might that might matter for people. Are there things that your CMS might be interested in having highlighted that we could measure within something like the Web Almanac? I do think that there's. Go ahead, Yanis.
I just wanted to, as we're coming up towards the end, it dawned on me that perhaps not everybody here has actually seen the Web Almanac.
Oh, yes.
So if you don't mind, perhaps we could take the last couple of minutes, because this became super interesting, geeking out about measuring the web and all of that.
Yeah.
I agree with your sentiment that I think everybody on this web, whether at a university or at a vendor or agency, we're all building the web. Yeah. It matters to us, but perhaps you could show, I know you've also dripped some of it out on LinkedIn, perhaps you could jump from the slides to show us a little bit, and then I'll make sure to, in the summary, to have both the slides and the takeaways from what you mentioned, and then perhaps also a screenshot and a couple of links to interesting pieces in the Almanac. So here you go, yes.
Yeah, so this is the Web Almanac, and yeah, that totally makes sense. So we have here, you can look at the previous year's content. So going back to 2019, you've got the table of contents here, and some of the chapters that have grayed out have not yet been published yet, but they're still being worked on. So you can see the list of chapters that are included as part of that.
Well, let's take a look at perhaps your chapter. I don't know. I know you didn't do it all alone, but let's take a look at accessibility.
Yeah. So within that,
here in a few seconds we have left, that was a surprising new insight for you, or where the response has been eye-opening.
I mean, we can certainly see the growth in accessibility over time, and see that there's a greater focus in that. it wasn't a huge surprise, but it was interesting to go off and to see to see that there is this growth of area and the growth of errors associated with area. So again, trying to go off and see where there's improvements that make sense around certain areas. I guess it's worthwhile just sort of highlighting that all of this information, you can see the data and the query here. So if you click there, you can see what the specific query is being used for BigQuery, but also you can see the data behind this. So again, you can see more information that is around this information, so that's something that people can dig into with more detail. The other thing is I mean, it's a long chapter, but I wanted to the area that I guess added actually there's a piece around overlays that I think was also interesting. So for people who may not have heard, there's a lot of debate around overlays and their implementation, and that's where these tools where people add a button in the corner of the site to go off and often they come with claims about automatically fixing the accessibility issues behind them, and we're able to go off and both get some more data around the use of the apps, but also try and put it in a context that I think helps people go off and understand what some of the limitations are and what some of the challenges are with overlays, and where they can be useful, because there are some types of overlays that can be quite useful or necessary. So trying to provide that additional clarity, but I also like having this breakdown of countries and places.
So this is where you said that Luxembourg are leading the world. Is that what you thesis that
yes.
you referenced earlier?
So sorry, Netherlands is leading the world. Oh my goodness, got that wrong. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So
right. See if you can find your own country on this list.
It's yeah. So if you go and get the in-depth data for this, you have a lot of additional information that's available, and there's state-specific information as well.
Yeah, I think I saw you just shared this on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's great.
So
thank you so much, Mike.
No problem at all. This has been great.
An amazing deep dive into the incredible work being done, like you just reiterated, all by volunteers, very much in the open source spirit of sharing is caring to help us all build a better web. But I think it's also really encouraging to see the progress. Like we keep talking about, at least from my side, like how accessibility is like our shared bad consciousness, but seeing that it's actually improving.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really good to see that. It's a good message here at the end of the year.
Yeah, and with sustainability, it's nice too, because it's raising awareness. So many people aren't aware of the environmental impact of the web.
Yeah. Yes, that's very true. We're right on time. Thank you everybody for joining. I will send out an email afterwards, also copy Mike in so you can keep the conversation going. Like you've also seen here, the Almanac is not done. I think when it's done, the next one begins.
That's
so
right.
I think there's a lot of things there so that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, and we can actually use some data and measure the things that matters to us. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. That's all we had.
Thank you, Yannis.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.